July 2022. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Make sure to go to my website, www.susanmilling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. Like my official YouTube videos and share the link to my official YouTube videos. If you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect. So I will put the link into the information section of this official YouTube video of mine after listening to a short clip in regards to the 5. And while I have paid attention to some of the things Tyrus says, just because Greg Felt is on there, just pointing that out there, I acknowledge that though. I can acknowledge in that particular though I've also heard that Miss Carino is short too. I don't know how many high heels she wears, so I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm only 5'4", so don't let what you might think fool you. I'm kind of really short in that regard. I've made the joke I'm fairy sized in that regard. It's a personal opinion. I can make fun of myself really easily. And have so from a very young age. So, in reference to the clip in the link, know that just because I'm going to talk about Texas, I am Second Amendment friendly. However, in that reference, I'm talking about a link for a video clip. I had to explain that to a guy in regards to magazine subscriptions, which I'm fairly certain while we were in the state of Texas, I don't know of any locations that would be, although that would be an interesting one. I think it'd have to be, I think by technicalities in that reference of magazine subscriptions, that would be more military than it would be in reference to the aspects of the civilian sector. In his particular reference regarding what he said was firearm references to magazine clips. And so when I said magazine subscriptions, I was talking about, since we were at the same location, the bookstore and stuff, so I was referring to those magazine subscriptions, though I can make the joke since I'm medically retired from the Army. I would guesstimate in some ways there probably are those types of magazine subscriptions. It only took from around 2006 or 2007 to now in the year 2022 to figure that out. However, somebody in the Army and or the Air Force and or the Coast Guard and or the Marine Corps and or the Navy might know about magazine subscriptions in that capacity, which I can make a joke since I was supposed to be in logistics. Probably. By technicalities, probably would know about the magazine subscriptions in that particular Second Amendment capacity. Though, again, I'm about education, so I was referring to that at that time in 2006 or 2007. Now, in 2022, I can technically say both. So there you go. Make that joke. Nonetheless, in regards to situations I brought up in the year 2008 and 2012 and the years in between up to 2013 in the state of Texas, because that's where I was living at the time, I had informed people I had the opinion that anybody such as, all of those Democrats that proudly had voted for 44 or President of the United States of America, Barack Obama, only because he had been African American, or they called him the first black president. I didn't really understand how they didn't see how that seemed racist at all. I mean, it is one thing to bring that forward, yes, but that was the only thing that they called him at the time. They didn't ever call him any name other than the first black president, which was very confusing to me, because I'm fairly certain his official title thingamabob on his desk, if he had one, probably didn't say the first black president. So there's that. Oh yeah, in that reference. So this is new in regards to first reference. So the U.S. Supreme Court, or United States of America Supreme Court Justice Thomas, or Clarence Thomas, Justice of the United States Supreme Court, as far as the African American situation, but that is in regards of the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision. However, I'm going to include several links to take into this viewpoint for the various proverbial aspects. So I can see why in certain references the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Because if you take into the viewpoint, whether you have heard of official before or not, I think that is the reference point to certain references of Q and Q anonymous. It's literally in the name. And if you take the O in that reference, but you take the middle line, you can make a Q of A. And because I am how I am, if you take the A and turn it upside down, it looks like an ice cream cone. You move the line to on top, it's like a cherry on the top of the ice cream cone. Or if you keep it there, but then put it looks like a hat, like a little party hat. If you keep the line but like at a little bit of an angle. I am this much of a dork. Yes, I am. Good morning, or technically good evening, depending on where you're at. Nonetheless, in regards to Maya Flores and becoming a congressman in an area where it's a border state, well, her being born as reported in the area of Mexico and legally immigrating to the United States of America in the state of Texas and being married to a border agent, well, that's something to take in consideration to my prior official YouTube video. I'll put that link in there. And so, in the information section. So when you take in consideration the reality as to certain things, well, that's important to think about as to how not just the way the viewpoint is as to the five brought up, as to the AOC situation, but that's in New York City compared to the state of Texas. And so that is not the same area. New York City, you're not going to have people that can cross a river area to a degree, because it's the Atlantic area of the oceanic waters. I mean, there are the facts of different ports and ships. There's no denying that. There's the customs to take into consideration to look at the different cargo ship areas. That's been a thing that people in New Jersey have reported seeing before, and those different containers. How some of those, and you've seen it in regards of prior news reports as to semi-trucks. So that's something that has been a viewpoint that New Jerseyans have seen before. And so, but in reference to the Texas border and that particular aspect, that's a shorter amount of distance across the river area, though there's also other locations. Now, in reference to how Maya Flores and her family are Hispanic, though specifically Mexican in the references of, the facts are that she might have a bit of a knowledge as to why. Having been born in Mexico, but then having the background of, there is that knowledge in that regard. So, in certain differences, obviously, those certain similarities, when I had brought forward
the aspect of the attack on the 11th of September 2001 to the Northeast area overall in the state of Texas, individuals that I had known in person, face to face in person, who were mainly Democrats, tried to claim that they thought they knew more about where I was born and raised in comparison to actually having that direct knowledge. And then when they tried to claim certain things, such as the after effects of my head injury, well, yes, I haven't denied that. Don't tell me something about myself that I already told you. That's kind of ironic that you would think that that would make any sense for that. And so, in comparison to the name calling, then thereafter, it's one of those, well, why don't you actually have a mature discussion to actually debate the topic points and find a way to actually have a genuine fix to repair situations in the correct capacities if you're actually about life? However, it is an irony when you think about it as to the Democratic policies, how they have their issues regarding Roe versus Wade, though they have no problem in reference to the border. That doesn't make sense when you really think about it. Because if you were to think about the connections that Maya Flores and her husband would have the knowledge of in the Mexico area, not that all of Mexico is bad, of course, though the reality of certain situations. And so when you take in that viewpoint as to the Democratic Party and how their issues as to Roe versus Wade, they literally are more, and this is my viewpoint of, they literally, as per the actions and words thereof, they seem to be more accepting of people to survive such treacherous conditions to then take care of them in the United States of America. And yet, the individuals within the United States of America who have been dealing with such treacherous conditions that should be taken into consideration for actual genuine betterment, somehow the Democratic Party seems to think that that would be easier to deal with in comparison to actually dealing with the situations in the United States of America. To me, that doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense back in the years when I was living in Texas in 2008 for this particular regard, all the way through 2012. That made absolutely no sense. How they'd think, because especially with how many Democrats are about their feelings. Well, if they're about their feelings, what are you going to say that Hispanics and various illegal immigrants in whatever capacity, are you going to say that they don't have feelings? Because that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If they, and especially with as many Democrats that bring up their college degrees and so on and so forth, and then their feelings, that doesn't really make sense when you really think about the intellectual properties of that. So, in the intellectual capacities to review that particular situation, it's common sense. They wonder why certain situations are as they are. They are informed of what it would take to fix and repair it. In comparison, they find it better to do more bureaucratic legislation in comparison. And when you think about certain things, which is an irony because, as Judge Janine has pointed out in the particular official clip in the information section, which I pointed out as well, this United States of America was formed on Judeo-Christian principles. And so in that particular reference, when the Holy Roman Catholic Church began in the very beginning and through several decades and centuries, they only had the priests read certain information to the masses. When you take in consideration the amount of bureaucracy and legal factors that the Democratic Party has fought for, and then think about is the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, for that. So in the difference, obviously, but for the proverbial viewpoint, especially the Democrats who voted for 44 just because of the Obamacare stuff, or Affordable Care Act as far as what it's called now, think about how after the ACA was passed, how many individuals stood up and were like, wait, we didn't know that. Why didn't you tell us that was in the paperwork? Sort of thing. Why are we being charged for this? Wait, we want universal health care, but what about this? And so when you think about it in a proverbial metaphor, that's the Holy Roman Catholic Church as to the history of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. When they first started doing the public readings in regards of the priests. The priests would read in Latin to people. Well, Latin, and most people couldn't read Latin or understand Latin, so they literally spoke in a different language on purpose to confuse the masses. They went over some aspects, yes, in a larger amount of truth. When you take into the viewpoint, though, they really focused on the morals and ethics as far as their sermons and speeches. So in regards to the aspects of the ACA, among a few other bills, the viewpoint up, look even in reference to the Patriot Act. You have how it went across all boards and everything was as it was, and then all of a sudden, well, wait, we didn't know about that, and we didn't know about that in comparison. It's in writing. It's right there. So why not actually fix and repair the situations in the United States of America before going and taking in consideration all these other factors? So if in regards to the Roe versus Wade situation and the influx of, so I can make a pop culture reference. The Handmaid's Tale. And so when you think about the reference as to, are you going to try to claim that that's better only because of whatever thought process? Because then when you think about that, just because some situations of might be, think about that as to the morals and ethics. That, and in my updates to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, all you need to do is take a look in the years of 2019 and 2020 as to those particular references. People knew, everyone in both sides, to my son and my daughter, as far as their biological. I was the only Republican on both sides at that time. While one may have been Republican-ish and didn't really discuss it, the rest were all Democrats. As far as what they had said. And so, that's just the facts. The voting records obviously would prove that. And so when you take into the consideration of what my son, my daughter, and I dealt with, and you have 2019 and 2020, I mean, yes, there's also 2021 and this year of 2022, in reference to the Ornery PSA through my website, www.susanmealing.com. Listen to the links as far as the videos. Pay attention to those details. Contemplate that. And so if in that regard of, well, so for one anonymous official video as to the illegal borders crossing problem, think about that. Especially the irony as to the amount of college degrees types as to those situations. What they, as to the college degree types, in those references. Think about when I was in 5th grade. Think about when I was in 2nd grade. As far as that, in that consideration. And so when you think about how, if you want to try to claim that it's all in the name of science, I call bullshit. Because if in that capacity was, why would you ever change anything in the ACA or ever fight as a Democrat to change anything in the ACA? If it was actually only in the claim regarding science, then there should be no problem in regards of the ACA by their own standards. Just pointing that out there. They'd be hypocritical in any other capacity. So either in that particular reference, they'd have to actually just accept it, that they're hypocritical, though they'd have to acknowledge it and then be willing to step down and get out of the way for those who actually have morals and ethics because of the need for that. Sure, there's the history as to the formation of NASA in certain references. That has to do with space, which is questionable, obviously, because this is on Earth. Think about that. This is on Earth. This isn't in reference to space stuff. And even with, that's not what occurs out in that regard. I don't know if maybe prior references to. So personally, I know what I've experienced because of my clarifications and verifications that have been capable to be clarified and verified. I haven't ever had any situation regarding whether in the backyard of where I grew up in New Jersey or the oceanic waters, as far as the Atlantic, or the Gulf of Mexico in regards of my scuba diving, or in reference to 1999 in Indiana, or in reference to 2011 in regards of Irving, or in reference to, well, obviously during my Medal of Honor art project trips. I have not ever had one situation that I have ever dealt with anything in any capacity where any, whatever you want to call them, as far as extraterrestrials or UFO or UAP, I have personally, as many situations as I have had, I have not at any point in time ever had anything remotely close to how bad, if you review the situations regarding my childhood as to those factors. There is ethical science in comparison to what I personally dealt with as per the clarifications and verifications in truth. I haven't ever had anything in the slightest capacity. And I have dealt with some things. I have handled a lot of situations. It's just pointing that out there. Whether people review the aspects as to my scuba diving, however seriously, of whatever capacity, there is not one time where it has ever been to those factors. So I don't know if that's pop culture references. I don't know if in that reference to what some people might say as to different situations, if it's actually been where the science people in comparison to actual space beings at all. And if that's the case, in that any capacity of hypotheticals, then think about that. Whether that's paperclip, whether that's the MK Ultra, whatever in those references in comparison to space coming to Earth. I didn't ever have any of those to that level. Just going to point that out there. So I don't know what other people's viewpoints are. I don't know if that has to do with the whatever pop culture reference, because only recently have I found out about a movie called Bumblebee and been capable to kind of compare it to my Bumblebee car Zippy. Yeah. I mean, realistically, in truth, that kind of, it's kind of actually irony about that in some ways, because Zippy, I could have my iPod on shuffle, and when I would do that, so what would happen is I'd have the convertible down, and I'd be driving Zippy. We'd be doing our thing, driving around, mainly the DFW area at that time, or even in San Antonio, and in the middle of a song on the iPod, it would literally flip. And it wouldn't be from me changing the button or anything like that. It would literally, what Zippy would do is she would have whatever song, and it really is kind of like that Bumblebee movie. I've had a few situations in certain cars like that, but not the same way. And when I've had certain signals that I've seen, I have done certain things regarding the radio because of remembering what Zippy had done. And so in the reference to where in the middle of a song, the lyrics would change. Not lyrics of the song, but it would be a certain point, and then the iPod would shuffle to the next song with whatever, and it wouldn't even necessarily be the beginning of the song. It could be towards the end of the song or middle of the song and go to another point and do that. And that's what Zippy would do when I'd be driving my Bumblebee car. And so, which is really ironic regarding that movie, which I didn't see until 2020 or 2021. I didn't even know that was a thing. And so, that's what Zippy would do. It got annoying sometimes, I will acknowledge that. Because usually I'd be totally jamming out and be like, yeah, good music, and and then Zippy would do a Zippy thing. And so, but in that reference, there's not any point in time where I've ever handled anything that was in that capacity regarding the scientific types, if that makes sense. And so I don't know if that's something to take into consideration in a larger capacity, because that is a reality. No matter what I've dealt with, and I can obviously distinguish, these are not references of projection. I know the difference, I understand the difference, I comprehend the difference, I know what I dealt with in regards of the oceanic waters. When in reference to the Gulf of Mexico, when in reference to out from Boca, though especially in reference out in the Vandenberg area, when I landed at the bottom of the oceanic waters out there. So, while some people have, I mean, nobody's ever talked with me about it. Nobody's ever asked me about it. Even when I made attempts to speak with the civilian, as they call themselves, recreational lazy scuba divers, they didn't see any need to.
they didn't see any reason to discuss what was in the water at any point in time. And when I brought up scuba diving law enforcement, they didn't seem to see any actual reason to discuss that either. So, I mean, that, in my opinion, is a guilty conscience when looking back now in 2022 because of whatever their particular version of, I suppose, an MK Ultra instead. So, with the viewpoint as to Maya Flores and the border control agent, as far as her husband, and having been born in Mexico but legally immigrated to the United States of America per the description, those factors regarding if in the version of as to The Handmaid's Tale, well, I mean, there is the facts of how it's known that I was taken off of a military installation the age of only awake from my coma for less than 6 months at that point regarding, and then having the justice of the peace situation and having delivered my son a year and a half afterwards and my daughter 2.5 years after waking up from my coma. And in the city of San Antonio, and having explained to a multitude of Democrats whatever actually occurred to actually assist me in the correct way, instead of the garbage that occurred. There hasn't been anybody that has ever, at any point in time, actually done anything that I would consider fixing and repairing correctly for me, or even asking what I would need. So when I've made attempts to actually accomplish, to achieve things, what has been the problem? Because if that has to do with a bunch of Democrats, what does that reprove then? Especially when you take that in consideration. Though in regards of the Republican aspect, there is the knowledge of. It's supposed to be supposedly, and yet in that reference. So Gutfeld had brought up, well, if I, in this proverbial way, if I came out as a Democrat, it probably wouldn't be a surprise. But if you want to be the, oh, well, I'm more Republican than you, I'm more Republican than you sort of thing, are you serious as to the way certain situations have been? To take that into review? Every capacity of capable to be found as far as and instead what occurred to this point in time. And then when you take in consideration Miss Melania, the First Lady of the United States of America to 45, President of the United States of America Donald J. Trump, well, look at that. As far as the different magazine covers, she's a supermodel apparently beforehand to be First Lady of the United States of America. Why wasn't she on any magazine covers? Is that the review as to the socialist aspect? Well, these females weren't on, and so we had these ways of this and that capacity. In comparison, how many First Ladies of the United States of America that are, or were, depending on the time frame, a Republican, that have ever been on the cover of whatever magazine compared to in the Democratic capacity? What is the number per total from the starting point, from the specifically with her. Specifically, unless it was actually important to. So when it got to the point that when I was in Washington State, after that, well, who actually cared? Anyway, I mean, in truth, who actually cared? Because if it was actually cared about, who did I ever know at one point in time, in person, face to face in person, that spoke with me in truth? And it doesn't matter whether in reference to Washington State or the state of Texas or Illinois or New Jersey. If I knew in person, face to face in person, who actually spoke with me in truth about it. Because if in that capacity it was because I didn't go and make my official YouTube channel instead, or whatever review of as to the wishful thoughts, then go and listen to the anonymous official YouTube video. And what aspects of that would be in truth as to the knowledge of. Because how is that considered humanity? As to anyone I once knew in person, face to face in person. In any capacity, in actual truth. Because in that reality, as to the proof of, in whatever viewpoint, could actually just speak with me in truth, but made the choice why? Whether or not I knew beforehand, in any capacity, why? What would that reason, which would not be reasonable, be? What would that wishful, excusable choice be that would be unexcusable for the wishful excuse? What would the aspects of an unwarranted cause be as to how unwarranted and unimportant aspect to those individuals be? In comparison, when you really think about it, could just have asked me in truth, or was it because you didn't have somebody type something up or inform you beforehand? Because if it's that, and you have a college degree, what does that inform you of? So Judge Janine is correct in the 5 in her commentary. That is abnormal to actually be to that level. And so you really should listen to the 2 different links to the anonymous official videos. Add that to the reference regarding the 5 as to the clip, and then re-listen to this official YouTube video of mine. Go to my website, www.susanmeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. Look through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA. Today is the 8th of July, 2022. Oh wait, no, it's the 9th of July of 2022. Or about to be the 9th. I misread the clock. It's almost the 9th of July, 2022, though it is still the 8th of July, 2022.